Hey everybody, my name is Jim Brogan, and today I want to talk about something that has always frustrated me. When a president comes into power, the things that are happening during his inauguration, he gets credit or blame for, like he caused them. All during the beginning of his presidency, from day one, for the next 4 years, whatever happens in the world, whatever happens in this country, he gets credit or blame for, whether he could have done anything about it, whether he was responsible for it or not. And this irritates me. There are things that are beyond a president's control. And there are things that a president does that go into the next administration, whether the next administration wants them or not. So it is not fair to blame a president for everything that happens during his presidency, especially the first 12 to 18 months, maybe even 2 years of his presidency. See, a lot of things in this world take time to work out. Things don't happen overnight, especially economies. Economies the size of the United States, and especially if we're talking about the world having a problem and it affecting the United States, these economies don't turn on a dime. They can't be fixed overnight. Franklin Delano Roosevelt, a Democrat, came into office during the Great Depression. The economy of not just the United States, but the whole world was in the toilet. He inherited a shit show, and he managed to turn it around. He gave us Social Security, welfare, food stamps, all of the programs that we now rely on as a safety net if everything goes wrong. If no matter how hard we try, we can't get a job. If no matter how hard we work, we can't pay the bills. If everything goes to hell in a handbasket and we just can't make it on our own, because of Franklin Delano Roosevelt, we have that safety net. Delano Roosevelt served 3 terms as president. He fixed a lot of problems. But now come Dwight D. Eisenhower. Don't have a lot to say about Eisenhower, except for the fact that he started something rolling that would later affect Jimmy Carter. And that is, he participated along with the British in a coup d'etat, removing a democratically elected leader in Iran and strengthening the monarchy there, leading to the despot Shah of Iran that some people may remember if they're my age or older, but trust me, it was important, because the Shah of Iran treating his people so badly led to his eventual overthrow and the installation of an even worse theocratic dictatorship. So we move on. John F. Kennedy, again, a Democrat. John F. Kennedy, Lyndon B. Johnson, Democrats, took us all the way to the moon. We started way behind the Russians in an attempt to dominate space and get to the moon, and we beat them because of John F. Kennedy and Lyndon B. Johnson. Lyndon B. Johnson have some problems with him, but John F. Kennedy also made the Russians back down when they were putting nuclear missiles in Cuba, made them take those nuclear missiles out of Cuba. That was a really dangerous thing. It was having nuclear missiles 90 minutes off our coast. That was a big deal. Again, a Democrat, wisely using the military and diplomacy, saved us from what could have been really, really, really disastrous circumstances. Move on to Nixon. Everybody knows Nixon was a crook. Nixon set us up for a lot of the economic mess we have now. He went to China and started the deals in China that eventually led to U.S. companies that were paying people well here in the U.S., relocating to China where they could pay people pennies on the dollar for what they had to pay here to make the same products. That's why everything we have falls apart as soon as we get it home, because, well, it's no longer made in the U.S., no longer has any quality standards, no longer has any work ethic put into it. It's just, you want cheap, we give you cheap. That's what the Chinese tell us. You can thank Nixon for the fact that all of our companies have gone to China. Thank you very much, Republican Nixon. We all know he was a crook. He was about to be impeached. His own party, he was so bad his own party was willing to impeach him, and Gerald Ford took over behind him, another crook, and pardoned him to make sure that, he wouldn't go to jail. During this period of time, inflation got out of hand. Step in Jimmy Carter, a Democrat, and inflation is out of control. It is going through the roof. And with the kind of courage almost no politician has, he did the most unpopular thing he could possibly do. He backed the Treasury Department in their decision to deliberately put the country into a recession in order to nip inflation in the bud, to slow and stop inflation. It was not popular, but it worked. That's the important thing. It worked. It saved us from an out-of-control inflation situation where you'd have been buying a stick of chewing gum for $100 today if he hadn't fixed it. He got hit with problems that were not of his making. He put us into a recession trying to fix the mess that was made by his predecessors. And he also wound up having to deal with an Arab oil embargo where we had no oil coming from the Arabs and we were not self-sufficient in oil at that time. And so the price of oil and gas went through the roof, or at least perspective at that time. Wish for those prices. 75 cents a gallon. Oh my God. Who could afford that back then? But that was where we were. And with gas shortages and long gas lines, people held him responsible. He didn't cause it. And then toward the end of his presidency, in the last year of his presidency, another disaster happened that was started by Eisenhower, and that is the revolution in Iran and the taking hostages of Americans. Of course, they hated Americans. We propped up a despot for 20 years. Why wouldn't they hate Americans? If you take the time to read the things that the Shah did, you'll understand why they hated Americans, knowing that we were the reason they endured that. And also, when the Shah fled them, we gave him asylum, and they were furious about that. So they took our people hostage and give us back the Shah. We're like, no, we're kind of responsible for him because we kind of put him in place and held him in power all this time. So he's a piece of dirt, but we've got to protect him. Jimmy Carter's hands were tied on all that. Now, as far as the economy goes, his bid to put the country into a recession and stop inflation worked. And he also started social programs, short-lived social programs that put people back to work by paying the government paying half of their salaries so that employers would hire people that they needed but otherwise couldn't afford to hire, which helped kickstart the economy and get the economy going despite the fact that we had been in a recession. And so by the end of his presidency, his first term, his only term, the economy was coming back, and it was coming back like gangbusters. And the hostages that had been kidnapped at the beginning of his last year in office, he had spent so much time negotiating, trying to get their release. There was a failed military attempt to rescue them. Yes, we put it on the commander-in-chief that the military fails, but we were dealing with military equipment that was old and worn out from having been used the shit out of in Vietnam. That's another thing Nixon and Ford did. They lost Vietnam for us. The military did not properly plan for the possibility of sand getting in the vents and clogging up the motors of the helicopters. They had been flying these things in the jungle and thought they could fly just as low on the desert as they did in the jungle. And they were wrong. They weren't experienced at desert fighting. They got it wrong. They screwed up. Carter took the blame. But by the end of his presidency, he had negotiated the release of all these hostages. They were on a plane on their way back to the United States the day that Reagan was inaugurated. They landed in the United States during Reagan's inauguration, and Reagan took the credit. See, they're so scared of Reagan, they released the hostages. No. Jimmy Carter had negotiated for 300 some days, trying to get them released, and finally came to an agreement and got them released. Then we come to Reagan. Well, Reagan sees Jimmy Carter has pushed us into this fantastic situation where money is just flowing through the economy, and he tells us, I can make it better. I can make it better. Let's give huge, huge, huge tax cuts to the rich and corporations, and they'll pay people more, hire more people, and pay more people more money because they'll have all that money to spend. Right? Trickle-down theory. Give the rich more money, more money trickles down to the poor, right? So before Reagan, we had a situation where corporations paid astronomically high taxes on their profits. So to avoid those taxes, they would pay their employees high, give their employees good benefit packages, spend enormous amounts on research and development to make the company bigger, better, stronger, and give really, really good dividends so that their profits would be less and they wouldn't have to pay as much taxes. All these things for write-offs so that they wouldn't have to pay as much taxes. In comes Reagan, says, well, let's do away with a lot of these deductions, but cut the taxes way, way down low. And with no tax, with very, very low taxes, they're going to pay you even more, give you even more benefits. Well, what started happening? Companies didn't share the windfall of profit from not having to pay all those taxes. They looked at it and said, we can cut back on R&D, research and development, because, well, we no longer have to spend that money. We can keep it. They're not going to tax it as much. And wow, we get more. We can keep more money. We don't have to keep paying for all these benefits. We can start cutting back on benefits. There's no reason to increase people's wages. Let's keep the money. And that's what the rich did. They kept the money. And since Reagan, the gap between the poorest Americans and the richest Americans has grown exponentially, and the middle class has shrunk and become borderline poor. Republicans want to call people who make $5 million a year middle class. Bullshit. I got to call it like it is. Bullshit. $5 million a year is not middle class. And the middle class has shrunk. And it's become, and it's borderline poor since Reagan, because of Reagan. And what else did Reagan do? Before Reagan, you always saw two commentators on the news. They didn't come on alone. You had your conservative and your liberal. And the conservative would give his conservative spin on the news, the liberal would give his liberal spin on the news, and they would discuss it like civilized human beings. We'd get both sides of the story, get an opportunity to make up our minds. Reagan didn't like that. Reagan did away with the policy with the FCC policy that required a both sides argument, and made it so that if you just want to tell one side of the story, you should be allowed to tell one side of the story. Nobody arguing with you, nobody giving you anything back. And if you just want to hear one side of the story, well, don't change the channel. Just keep listening to the side of the story that you like. And that's how we got to this polarized state where everybody thinks that the other side is lying and everybody is confused about what really happened, because well, you hear one thing on conservative media and you hear another thing on liberal media, and what's the truth? Well, the truth are the facts in the middle that both of them are basing their arguments on. But we lose track of the facts because, well, facts are malleable things these days. They're no longer solid things. We've turned them into Play-Doh that we can manipulate with propaganda. And this is because of Republicans. There are no bones about this. This is 100% the fault of Republicans. Republicans did this to us. Ronald Reagan did that to us. So the polarization of this country goes all the way back to Reagan. Although Democrats and Republicans have been going at each other for longer than that. But I grew up hearing Republicans scream that Democrats were coming for their guns. All my life, Democrats have been coming for my guns. And I still got my guns. They're not very good at it, are they? What Republicans are good at is telling lies. That's all they're good at. So Ronald Reagan took an economy that was steamrolling ahead because of the fantastic job Jimmy Carter had done, and started it tanking. It didn't really start to tank until we got toward the end of his presidency. So George H.W. Bush managed to get elected behind him, but the effects of their policies were really showing by then, and George H.W. Bush served one term and he was done. In comes Bill Clinton. Inherits a shit show. Now, I don't care what you say about Bill Clinton sticking his dick in this and that. That ain't none of my business. It ain't none of yours. Men and women do it. And sometimes they do it improprietely. Sometimes they do it in places that they shouldn't. I don't care where he stuck his dick. He was a damn good president. He pulled us out of the shit show left to us by 12 years of Republicans, and we were a booming economy again by the end of his administration. Despite the fact that Republicans never let up on him. They were on him like a tick on a bloodhound. They were just sucking him dry. And yet he still managed to do a fantastic job as president. Move on to Baby Bush, George W. He inherited a booming economy. There were some warning signs coming, though. I mean, there were oil problems. There were warning signs that oil was going to be an issue. There was this, that, and the other. But nah, there's money in the coffers. But Clinton managed to give us a surplus. We got a surplus. We got to do something with that surplus. And what does he do with that surplus? Does he invest it in this country? Does he help people get better educations for better jobs? Does he fix the roads and bridges and railroads and upgrade all of our decaying infrastructure? Oh, hell no. He gives that money away to the rich. The rich need the money. Give more money to the rich. It'll trickle down. Remember? It'll trickle down. You know? Again, they're still with this. It'll trickle down. It ain't never happened, but it's going to happen. Just you watch. It'll trickle down. And so we go, okay, the only reason he got a second term was because he was so stupid that his administration wasn't paying attention, dropped the ball, and let over 3,000 Americans here on American soil be killed by terrorists. I blame him. I do. I blame him. When you look at the facts of how disorganized everything was, He was commander-in-chief. It was his responsibility. And he didn't care. He even covered over the fact that almost everybody involved in the raid was a Saudi citizen, and the mastermind behind the raid was a Saudi citizen, and made sure that the only planes that could fly after that debacle were Saudi planes. Only Saudis were allowed to fly. Saudis were allowed to leave the country because they were worried about Saudis' retaliation against Saudis for what Saudis had done to us. Being in too deep with the Arabs has really, really, really been a problem for us for most of for all of the 1900s and into the 2000s. But be that as it may, we figured out that the guy who planned the attack, the mastermind, was in Afghanistan. We righteously went in to kick ass in Afghanistan. Of course, we didn't do it right. We didn't go in, boom, suddenly so we could catch them all off guard. We dropped leaflets for a couple of months telling them, hey, we're coming. Everybody be calm. We're not out to hurt the Afghan people. We just want these people right here. And those people went, oh, you just want us? Listen, we're going to hide. And they did. They went and they hid in the mountains and bunkers and tunnels and across the borders in countries that were technically our allies, but they were quasi-allies and perfectly willing to hide and protect our enemies. That was another shit show. And so we're mired in Afghanistan because they didn't do it right. And, well, we got one war going. Why not start another? I mean, so let's go into Iraq. Iraq's leader is not kind to us. He doesn't cut us deals on oil. He won't let our companies in there to drill and make money. He's got weapons of mass destruction. We got to get rid of him. Now, was the leader of Iraq a piece of garbage? Absolutely. Was he terrible to his people? Absolutely. Did his people want him gone? Absolutely. Was it a good idea to send American troops in there and depose him? Absolutely not. We should have learned by now, interfering in other people's politics is just stupid. We got enough problems with our own politics. Interfering with other people's politics just bites in the ass. And so we go in there and we take over Iraq. We go into Iraq, we depose Saddam Hussein. Naturally, there's some collateral damage. Most of the Iraqi people are happy. The people that used to be Saddam Hussein's people are not. We try to make everybody play nice together. They won't. We wind up with the terrorists that we were stomping out in Afghanistan taking a foothold in Iraq, where they never could have under the previous ruler because he hated them. And we weaken Iraq so that Iran gains strength in the region, and we've completely upset the apple cart. We've created an imbalance in the region, and we've made a huge mess. Again, under a Republican. Afghanistan we had to do. We did it wrong. We did it badly. That's on Bush. 100%. You can't blame any part of that on anybody else. That was his sign-off on that strategy. He was like, yeah, this is the way to go. Let's warn them 2 months in advance that we're coming. Yeah. Okay. Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. And so we wind up, he gets reelected for the only because of having 2 wars going, and Americans don't like to change leaders in the middle of a war. That's bottom line. which makes you think maybe he started this so that he could stay in power. Maybe. I don't know. That's a conspiracy theory. Don't put any weight behind it unless you find evidence to support it. It's just a conspiracy theory. But why not? Everybody else is blowing up conspiracy theories these days. Bottom line is, he was a piss poor president and got 2 terms in office when he shouldn't have got 1. He really, really screwed this country bad. In walks Obama, handed a shit show again. Are you noticing a pattern? Are you noticing a pattern? Obama gets a shit show. He struggles, he plays peacemaker, he gets both sides to work together, despite the fact that the Republicans by this time have decided that the only way they can hold on to any kind of power is to obstruct and get in the way and not allow anything to be done for the American people. This is Mitch McConnell's plan. Get in the way, prevent it from happening, don't let anything good happen. But Obama still managed to accomplish some really, really good things. And he dragged us out of the mess we were in and once again got the economy humming and working good and Americans back to work and people making money and people paying bills. And what do? We elect Donald Trump. Now, for the first 2 years of Donald Trump's presidency, Donald Trump is bragging about the stock market. The stock market's going up, it's going up, it's going up, it's going up, it's going up. But if you look at the stock market, when did it start going up? It started going up during Obama's presidency. And it was just a straight line from there. Trump didn't help it go up. In fact, Trump did nothing to help the economy. Nothing. He did do some to help the rich, though. He cut more taxes, made it so that more rich people would get more money. He didn't help the poor. He didn't help the middle class. He didn't do anything about that wealth gap between the middle class and the rich. No. The Republicans expanded what was considered the middle class all the way up to 5 million. You make 5 million a year? Do you? That's middle class. 5 million a year. No, it's not. 5 million a year, even with inflation, even with the changes in society, 5 million a year is bloody rich. So don't give me that crap. But this is the Republican definition of middle class. 5 million a year. And we should feel sorry for people who make only 5 million a year, right? Shouldn't we? Shouldn't we? If you're a Republican, I'm sure you do. But this is what Donald Trump did. And then halfway through his presidency, things start to go sour. And we get word that there is a really, really, really bad virus going around in China. And instead of setting up some kind of screening and prevention of Chinese coming into major airports in New York and California, he just ignores the problem. And when it starts blaring, because he knew about it. He knew about it way before it got on the news, way before we knew about it. He knew about it. And when it starts becoming a problem, when people start making a big deal about it, he does all kinds of nasty things, makes it a political issue, instead of stepping up and being the man and trying to protect us and prevent this deadly virus from spreading all across the United States. He does the exact opposite. He belittles the scientists who are trying to figure out how to stop it. He doesn't do that. But then he makes a show about the fact that a boat has some Americans on it, a cruise ship has some Americans on it, and COVID has gotten across that ship, and he decides we're not going to let Americans back in. who have COVID. Never mind, I've already let COVID spread all across the United States. I let it run rampant for months before the media caught wind of it. But now I'm not going to let 12 Americans back in. I'm going to make a show out of stopping Americans from coming back in because they got COVID, and we're going to protect us against COVID. I don't want my numbers to go up. It's all about the numbers now. What does it look like? We don't care about the reality. Forget anybody dying. If we can keep it hushed up, if we can keep it quiet, that's all that matters. We don't want numbers showing how bad a job we're doing. And the Republicans, the rest of the Republican Party ran with this nonsense of we don't need masks. Masks are an interference with our freedom, and you can use disinfectant to get rid of the virus, and shine some lights inside yourself to get rid of it, or take horse deworming pills to get rid of it. That's a whole nother topic. Like all conspiracy theories, there's a reason why people think that you can take the horse deworming pill, but I'm not talking about that now. Okay? So 2 years of great economy because he inherited it from Barack Obama. Now the chickens come home to roost. He's paying the price for his own policies in the last half of his presidency, and Republicans didn't blame him. The Republican Party got behind him, but the rest of the country, people who had sat on their asses and not voted for decades, people who had said politics is meaningless, there's no point in politics, shouldn't bother voting, got off their asses and voted. We had the biggest turnout we've ever had. No, there was no fraud, not on the Democrat side, but we can prove a lot of fraud on the Republican side. The man who had the power to pull the strings and pull off the fraud was in the Oval Office and did his best to rig that election, but he failed. And when Trump's attempts to rig the election failed, he didn't accept that he had lost. And he insisted that his followers not accept that he had lost. And he tried to get them to overthrow the United States government, to kill his own vice president, because his own vice president wouldn't go along with him staying in office after losing the election. We get past all of that. We get the most criminal president that we have ever had in the history of our country out of office. Joe Biden takes over. And what does he inherit? A shit show! A pandemic in full bloom, vaccines that need to be distributed to people who are afraid of the vaccines because of Republican propaganda, people who don't want to wear masks because it's interfering with their freedom because that's what their Republican leaders told them. A forced withdrawal from Afghanistan that was set up by Trump after Trump released 50,000 Taliban from prison and told them, the country is yours. Never mind the democratically elected government that the United States had helped install. Taliban have it back. That was Trump. Trump did that on his way out the door. He made a deal with the Taliban. And Biden was caught flat-footed. What the fuck? Stuck with a deal made by his predecessor. Stuck with things already in the works, already in the moving, that was done by his predecessor. Trump made a deal with the Saudis to cut oil production and not to start again until April of this year. Imagine that. Republicans want to blame Biden for canceling the pipeline from Canada to Texas that would have run right across the biggest reservoir of water in this country. A reservoir of water that supplies 8 states that grow almost all of our food. Really? Biden canceled that. Do you want an oil pipeline contaminating the water supply for 8 states that supply most of the food for this country? Are you looking to start a famine? But this is the insanity of Republicans. The oil crisis is all Biden's fault because he canceled that pipeline. Bullshit! That pipeline would not have supplied one drop extra of oil or gas for this country. It just would have made the oil companies richer. That's all it would have done. It wouldn't have helped you and me in any way, shape, or form. Gas prices started skyrocketing because at the end of as the pandemic wound down, people went back to work, people started driving, people started vacationing, people started going places. The supply was no longer there because the oil companies had cut production and shut down refineries. Now, to open those refineries, they need to make repairs and upgrades. And since they're making money hand over fist by having them closed, what's the incentive to open them? Okay? So this is the greed of oil companies, and this is caused by Donald Trump and the Republicans. Now, the first 2 years of any presidency, you can blame on or give credit to the previous president. First 2 years of this presidency sucked, but not because Biden did anything wrong. Biden did everything right. Biden took a shit show and tried to turn it into fertilizer to grow crops. Biden took a mess and tried to make it into something good. He's got people going back to work. He's got wages rising. He's got inflation starting to go back down. We've got the fuel crisis under control. We've got money going into repairing things that need to be repaired in this country. We're reducing the deficit. We're investing money in green technology that will create more jobs, better paying jobs than we ever had with the oil, safer, better paying jobs than we ever had with the oil industry. He's fixing things. That's what Democrats do. They fix the problems made by Republicans. So, if you want to cripple Biden, if you want to make sure that Biden does not do anything to help America, that Biden does not have the ability to lift America up and put America on the right path and get our economy going, if you want to make sure that Biden fails so that America fails, go ahead and vote Republicans in. It may be the last time you ever get to vote, or the last time your vote actually counts, because if Republicans are in office, they've made clear they want to make sure that some of your votes don't count. That's what they call fair. If you're sick and tired of Republicans messing up the works like me, make a commitment to never vote Republican again. If you get a shitty Democrat, primary him out. But never vote Republican again. And don't let your friends and family vote Republican again. Let's end this cycle of trashing America so that the rich can get richer and the rest of us get poorer. And our country gets more and more run down with roads that need repairing and bridges that need fixing and railroads that are falling apart. Let's fix this mess. Vote Democrat. Because only Democrats are looking out for anybody but the rich. Only Democrats are trying to fix this country, to repair the roads, the bridges, put people back to work, give a shit about what's happening in both the rural and the urban areas. See, Democrats haven't forgotten the rural people. They passed laws night and day to help rural people. Democrats want to help everybody. Republicans, not so much. Just a few. Help me, people. Let's help each other. Let's vote Democrat and watch this country flourish like it should. Thank you so much for watching. May God bless you all. Peace and prosperity to all of you.